Hi, everybody. Welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thanks very much for joining us today. Core Recruitment is an international recruitment company, and we deal in mid to senior level appointments for exec and non-exec positions. Now, we've been meeting lots of different entrepreneurs, business leaders from lots of different sectors as part of this interview series, and they're all available on our website, which is www.corerecruitment.com, or you can watch them on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere else you like. Now, we're very lucky today to be joined by Jon Hendry-Pickup. Hi, Jon. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you, Christian?
Very good indeed. Now, Jon, we've known across kind of like a number of different businesses. He's a real kind of like, sector kind of expert, and he's worked across lots of different companies. So I'm really excited today to be talking a little bit about Butlins. Now, my experience with Butlins is that I've been a supplier to Butlins. I've been a customer at Butlins. My other half used to do the PR for Butlins. So I love everything kind of like, about the business. So I'm really excited to have a little bit of a chat today. Before we get into it, Jon, I mean, your career has been like obviously kind of like a bit of hospitality bias, but you've been in supermarkets, you've been in budget hotels, you've been in casual dining, kind of like across the kind of like spectrum. Just to get us kicked off, can you give us a little bit about your background and experience, and I guess what connects all of those businesses as you've developed?
Sure. Well, I used to say I've done 25 years in retail and consumer, but I realize I've got to catch that up. So it's 30 years now. I'm wincing even as I say that now. But yeah, so all of my experience really is retail and consumer. And I think even if you look at, I suppose, hospitality on one side, retail on the other, I've always liked mass market UK brands. And the value for money element of it has been important to me. I don't think I'd necessarily be any good with a Louis Vuitton or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that product, but it's just not where my natural space sits. And so I started out life after doing a couple of years in consulting. I worked at Aldi, I worked at Tesco, both in the UK and overseas. So I lived overseas for a few years in the centre of Europe. I worked in China and California for a bit, and then time in the UK has been principally Travelodge, as you mentioned. I was the CEO of Prezzo for 2 years, and then I moved to Butlins in 2018 when they were family-owned business, part of the Bourne Leisure Group.
Absolutely. Now, this is Butlin's 90th year, is that right?
That's right. So we celebrated our 90th birthday on the first Easter weekend of school holidays. So that was a really special event for us.
Excellent. And I mean, the business, I mean, you joined, as you mentioned, kind of like as managing director in 2018 and then became CEO in kind of 2022. But I mean, the last kind of like 8 years with the business have probably been like the most changes in ownership structure, COVID, all of that kind of stuff. You definitely joined for the fun bit, right?
Well, 8 years sounds like it's quite a long time, so it must all be quite settled by now. But there have been so many things that have gone on over that period of time. When I started, we were part of Bourne Leisure. We were family owned, and have been for some time. And then during COVID, Blackstone, the US private equity firm, came in and bought the whole business whilst we were closed, actually. So a brave decision from their point of view. And then we separated from Blackstone. So Butlins went standalone at the back end of 2022 with the support from the Harris family. So we became standalone again for the first time since I think somebody called Butlin ran the business. So it's been three different ownerships over that time, and we've had 2 years of COVID, and so none of that's been really very normal.
And you've kind of like had a like plethora of different kind of like ownership structures that you've kind of like, operated within, one within the same business, but kind of like across kind of like different pieces as well. Can you just give us a little bit about like, because people have got mixed views about working for private equity, people have got mixed views about working for entrepreneur-led businesses, family offices, that kind of side of things. Can you give us a little bit about your thoughts on each and what the advantages and disadvantages are?
Sure. So obviously I've worked in PLC on one hand of it with Tesco, which was enormous and international, and then now a family office with one key stakeholder. I think there's a danger that you can get caught up in the ownership structure is a distraction from what it is that you do. And we've seen examples of businesses that maybe haven't done so well because too much money's come out of the business or whatever that happens to be. But from my point of view, what I really like about alternative investment management side of things, the way private equity works is you can make clear decisions really quickly. And that's certainly something that I've seen and I've experienced in the time when I was at Born Leisure, in the time with Blackstone, because they were great to work with, and also now with the Harris family setup. This is really great because you get a clear, simple way through to get things done.
Absolutely. Now, in one of your other interviews that I was reading up on, you said that one of the best bits about working at Butlins is that you get to go to the beach every day. And also that kind of like, I mean, you get to work where people get to go on holiday, which must be like part of the hospitality kind of fun environment.
Yeah.
Does this make it kind of like the best place to work in the world? Is this a fun
Uh,
thing to do?
it's a real joy. If you look at the last few weeks with the weather being what it is, the British seaside's fantastic when the sun's out, and it's always a fabulous experience when I go and walk around where the guests are because you really see the essence of what it is they're here to do, and it's quite a privilege, but also an expectation of us to make sure that we look after people during their holidays. They work very hard at the moment. We all know what's happening with cost of living and people having to manage their pennies very carefully. So when they come and spend time with us, I want to really make sure that we do a good job of that. But it's lovely when you see families, when you see kids having a great time. There's nothing better than that.
Absolutely. Now, it's been quite widely publicized that you're 3 years into a 5-year investment program and putting about £150 million redeveloping this 90-year-old kind of brand. Tell us a little bit about the expectations, tell us where you're spending the money and kind of like, I guess how you're future-proofing for the next stage of the business, right?
Sure. Exactly. The key thing, if you look at the history of Butlins and what Billy Butlin did originally, was he was an innovator and he was a risk taker and he brought new things to the UK that hadn't existed before. And we have to pick up and run with that legacy. I think if I look back a number of years, we probably hadn't been as clear as we should have been on what Butlins was for. So Butlins is very much about being the home of entertainment, making sure we give people things to do all day and all night. And so our focus has very much been in the last few years on how do we continue to improve the proposition. So not just how we build things, but part of it is that, but also what we're bringing to the resorts for people to see. But we've put a load of time and effort and money recently into bringing new and exciting things to play for guests. So things like Play Experience, which is our indoor activity centre that combines tech putt and neo games and glow pong and various other bits like that, all in one building. This has been really successful for us and great. We've also done new Sky Park playgrounds as well. So these are enormous 5-story playgrounds that will hold over 300 kids at any one time. These are the kind of things that our guests are expecting of us because they're always looking for new news.
Absolutely. And like where Butlin sits in the market, because it's definitely not budget, it's definitely not luxury, it's kind of in a bit of a distinct category, kind of like all on its own because of that kind of like emotional connection that so many people kind of like feel towards it. When you're kind of like positioning it from kind of a competitor perspective, who do you benchmark yourselves against and who do you think you compete against most?
Yeah, the benchmark is a really great question because it's one of the things that we looked at early on when I joined the business. We wanted to really understand what Butlins was for, what mission it was on. So we tried to look at the mission types that people were on when they came to see us. And for both family and adult breaks, they're looking for very sociable, very outgoing, give me loads of things to do, keep me entertained type of activities. And that's for both groups. And so therefore, we are adjacent to people. So if you think about anyone who's doing short breaks in the UK for everyone, so caravan parks is a great example. We're adjacent to that, but we don't really have an obvious direct Butlins 2 type competitor, which makes lining up what we do against other people quite difficult to do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Now you mentioned kind of like, that obviously everybody at the moment is cost conscious, like when it comes to pressures and all of that side of things as well. What initiatives have you been driving? What things have you been putting into the park to demonstrate, I guess, more value for money?
Sure. So we're hearing loads from guests at the moment and consumers as a whole about them being really careful with how they spend their money. And we can see that price sensitivity every day in how people are booking their holidays. But what's really clear is that when we give people A, price certainty, and B, a clear indication of value for money, then they really buy into that. So, for example, things like all-inclusive drinks that we launched a couple of years ago, we've now got around about 20% of our guests that have participated in that from nothing. Anything that allows them to plan and customize their holiday in advance, and they know exactly what the cost is going to be, and they can see that that's value for money, is something that they're looking for. So even though the initial holiday price itself at the moment is very sensitive, people are really keen to add on things like VIP passes or action passes, which is about the activities that they can do in the resort, all-inclusive food, all-inclusive drinks, these type of things. They want to add that on depending upon what type of break that they have. So our goal at the moment, whilst people are very price sensitive, is to give them certainty, make sure it's clear value for money about how we do that. And then what we're seeing is they're definitely picking that up.
Absolutely. And I guess that value for money side of things, because one of the things that Butlins, or I always think of when I think of Butlins, is live entertainment, live music, that kind of side of things. I don't think people who haven't been to Butlins realize just how large a scale you do this on. Can you just give us a little bit about that and a little bit about some of the activities that are really resonating with guests kind of like on park?
Sure. Well, it's critical in our marketing and proposition team that they look at things where they say, right, what's the stuff that only Butlins can do? So if you come and spend time with us and you're in Studio 36, which is our biggest entertainment venue, you're sat watching a show with probably 2,500 other people. And
Wow.
that's not something you're going to get in a caravan park or pretty much anywhere else you're likely to go in the UK. So that's why we push the home of entertainment bin, but it also allows us to do things like, for example, Masked Singer are with us again this year, so it's Masked Singer Live. We can do that at scale. We've got Britain's Got Talent Live coming next year. We've got things like Electric City, which is a fantastic neon-based show on stage, which again nobody else can do. And of course, Stephen Mulhern managed to do this at real scale as well. He's been brilliant with us. So these are the kind of things that pull Butlins apart, take it away from everybody else because nobody else can do that at the scale that we can.
Absolutely. Now, I really did do my research for this interview, and I saw that when you spoke at Warwick University Graduate Business School in early 2025, you were talking a little bit about the MBA that you went back and kind of like did. Now, a lot of people discuss like, should I go back and do an MBA? Should I not go back and do an MBA? So I guess I'll do this question in two parts. Firstly, you went back and did it. What did it give you, and what did you take away from it, and was it worthwhile?
I can't believe you managed to find that as well. So you saw my presentation speech. That was a really nice thing to do because graduation is such a happy day for so many people. From my point of view, the reason I went back was because at that stage in my career, I was trying to understand what I wanted to do next. And the great thing with something like an MBA, and particularly with Warwick Business School, the international nature of that cohort was vast, and that's part of the reason why I picked it. Learning from other cultures, learning from other ways of doing things, and also on subjects that I didn't have a great deal of knowledge on before. So particularly marketing strategy, and so on. It was a great way of additional learning. And so from my point of view, I know there's big conversations at the moment about higher education, about studying at university, about what value people get from it. My sense is if you've got a really targeted view as to what you're going to get from it and how you're going to apply that, then I definitely think it's worth doing. And I definitely got value from the time that I spent there because that got me in a particular direction as to what I wanted to do next.
Yeah. No, John, I've known you for a little while, and one thing which is desperately apparent is that you definitely do not run away from a challenge, which is one of the things which is really great. And like when you look at some of the businesses and some of the challenges that you've kind of like, managed over the years, like I mean, most recently in the press about like, the insurance side of things, managing kind of like, really challenging business in that casual dining market in terms of Prezzo and, restructuring kind of like, Travelodge, all the different ownership changes, kind of like, with Butlins, like resilience level wise, I imagine your pain threshold is pretty high. Like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you stay focused? What tips would you give to other people that are maybe going through kind of like tough situation. The thing with your tough situations, you seem to sign up for them though. You seem to seek them out, right?
I'm slightly worried about myself now. You've picked out an observation there that might be true that I hadn't thought of whether that was the case before. But as you describe it like that, it does sound like a slightly masochistic streak. But I don't think that's particular to me. If you look at the business environment that people in the UK have been through over the last few years, I think that ability to flex, that resilience, how to tackle the next problem when that comes along, has to be a core part of your skill set. It's just part of what we do day to day. I think there are two bits for me: one in work and one outside of work. The in work one is I have to get a team around me that I trust and that I believe in. And I'm really fortunate because at Butlins, my team are great. I really enjoy working with them. They're an absolute joy to spend time with. And I think you can never do all of these type of things on your own. Whatever type of business you run, you need people around you who bring new ideas, who have a different view on things with great expertise. And so from a work side of things, I would always say, have a team that you trust and that you believe in, because I definitely do, and that helps me every day. And I think outside of work, I try and make sure I keep fit and healthy. I try and go to the gym and get a decent amount of sleep because I feel that exercise clears my head. But in particular, the thing that matters to me is I've got a really close knit small family group around me, and just spending time hanging out with my wife, my kids. It's a really lovely, refreshing thing to do, and it brings some context into your life as well. And I think the little group of us are great together, and so that's my head clearing exercise outside of work.
Love that. Do you take the family to Butlins?
I have done, definitely. I mean, my kids are too old, really, because they're in their 20s. They're more likely to be on big weekenders. But Linz and I go to big weekenders fairly regularly. We've taken the neighbours. I try and go and see any new product that we put on. So we've been to Fat Boy Slim's weekend a couple of times. We went to Oktoberfest. We've done a couple of the different decade breaks as well. All of this is great. I really love it because I get to experience what I guess experience, but it's also fun. I mean, we've had great weekends doing this.
That's amazing. Now, from kind of on the Butlins customer profile, I guess there must be a lot of people who go every year. And again, I don't think people out there realize kind of like the size and scale of kind of like, Butlins and Bognor and all of that kind of side of things at Skegness. So could you just give us a bit of an idea in terms of visitor numbers, and then I guess also repeat visitor numbers in terms of people who are coming back booking the same week every year?
Yeah, I think if you haven't seen Butlins, you don't understand the scale of what goes on here. So if we look at half term that's just been, we had 55,000 guests that stayed with us over half term alone.
Wow.
And we'll have about 1.5 million guests that come to us in the year. And at any one time, we can have up to 19,000 people in the resorts across the three of them. So therefore, you can see the scale of what it is that we need to look after. And really, it's for everybody. We see a massive range of people. We want to be accessible for everyone. So you get a huge range of prices. Clearly, school summer holidays are more expensive. But if you want to come to Butlins for the first time, you don't want to spend loads of money. If you come in our Showtime breaks, which is the breaks for families with kids that are preschool, then you can come for £49 for a family of four for 4 nights. So we try and make sure that we're as accessible as possible for everybody across the spectrum, really.
Yeah. And as well as like the guests coming back and having like a lot of repeat loyalty, you've got some people that have been working with Butlins for ever and and have progressed within the business and all of that side of things as well. I mean, I've heard some people who have got like 30, 40, kind of even kind of like up to 50 kind of like years service, which is just absolutely incredible. Can you tell us a bit about the culture internally that you're trying to drive and what you're doing to retain people?
Sure. That's a really good example of not just us, but I think the industry as a whole,
Yeah.
which is people can join a business thinking that this is going to be a summer job, and suddenly it becomes a career because they get immersed in it. And we've got 2 of our team members on our leadership team, so the operating board of the business. 2 of them joined at 18 as redcoats. And I'm really proud of that. Of course, you want a range of experience. You can't just have people who've been here forever. You need fresh eyes into a business. But I think the balance of that is really important. And for me, what I really love about the business is you've got an opportunity to join and start as a lifeguard or as a somebody who works in a bar or a restaurant, or you could work it as a plumber or an electrician. But you can work your way through and across the business in so many different roles without having to leave the business. And so seeing those two people who are sat there on our operating board, who started at 18 years old. Well, one of them's now been here for more years than he'd want me to mention to you right now. That's a great indicator, and I think that's the symbolism to the rest of the team to say, okay, I can build a career here. I think from a cultural point of view, what are we trying to build? Well, I said before, Butlins is for everyone. The only way we can do that is if that's true for the team who work here as well, because they're the ones that are going to reflect that to our guests. So we work really hard to make sure that everybody can be themselves coming to work. When we look at surveys every year about what our team tell us about us as a business, some of it's great, some of it's hard reading from time to time, and that's stuff that we need to work on. But one question that always really stands out is I can be myself at work. And I think that's a critical element of what we're trying to be here, which is that you can bring your personality to this place. You can be different from everybody else, and that's okay because we get what we're about and what we're trying to give to our guests. And for me, that's something I'm really trying to push and promote.
Love that. Now, parking Butlins to the side just for a second, you in 2024 feel like you're stalker, I have to say, kind of like, literally, I'm not going to turn up outside your front door, but in April 2024, there's a digital micro donation charity, which is really phenomenal, called Pennies, that you joined the advisory board for. Can you tell us a little bit about the purpose of the charity? And I guess also, I mean, your day job is pretty full on. Like, can you tell us about, like, why you decided to contribute to an organization outside of Butlins as well?
Well, Pennies is as you said, a micro donations charity. So essentially, it's a digital charity tin. Whereas before, we all used to have change coins in our pocket. That post COVID, that just doesn't happen for most people anymore. And so the purpose of Pennies was that it's an acceleration engine for donations. So if you're online or if you go to pay for drinks or food at a till, and you spend, I don't know, £4.80, it says, do you want to round it up to £5? And that's the equivalent of putting money in a tin as it used to be. The team there are incredible, led by Alison. They're a fabulous team. I've known Alison for quite a long time because we introduced Pennies into Travelodge way back in the day, which is still going strong. And so when she spoke to me and said, we're growing our advisory board, we'd really like you to come and be part of that, it was not a difficult conversation for me to have. And I think actually the balance of what I do in my day job as an executive compared to what I try and do as a non-exec in that scenario of helping, guiding, making introductions, challenging some of the stuff that I'm not sure is going to work, things like that. It gives me a broader toolkit, but also I'm able to bring my experience of what I've seen into their business as well. And I've really enjoyed it in the time that I've been there, and I think they're a wonderful team.
Absolutely. And have you learned things that you brought back into Butlins as a result of being there as well?
Oh, definitely, because we're working hard now on making sure that we're getting Pennies into a certain bit of our business at the moment. And if I look across hospitality and leisure, there are loads of really vastly experienced individuals who work with Pennies, who've done things that we haven't yet done. And so learning from them about how to do that has been great. Seeing what other organizations are doing with their charitable donations, how they're bringing that into play. That's always learnings from my point of view. And also how a small team are managing to amplify their communications and their awareness of their business is great to see. I'm fortunate that our business has pretty much universal awareness, but there are things that they're doing in communications and connections with other people that I can definitely learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick side question, but like in terms of international guests who come to Butlins, what proportion come from outside of the UK?
We see some now and again, but nobody is coming inbound. It's a really fascinating one because I still go back to Warwick Business School now, and I talk to the strategy and practice group a couple of times a year. And when I ask people if they've heard of Butlins, everyone who's from the UK has heard of it. No one from outside the UK has heard of it, which is really unusual. So we don't stimulate inbound traffic from overseas. There's enough of a market for us to manage in the UK. We see ourselves as purely a domestic business, and there's loads of space for us to run after with that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I wonder if the Americans would get Butlins. You know what I mean? It's gonna be
Well, it's a really good question. I don't know. We could try that one day. I don't know whether they'd get big weekenders, but we should give that experiment a go. I think that would be great.
100%. Now, not going too far down the political lane, but as somebody who runs a really sizable business in the UK, if you could get the government to change one thing to positively impact business, just one thing, to positively impact business, what would you get them to do?
Now, I realize it's difficult for them when you look at hospitality as a whole because we're such a broad church. And
Mm.
what you need in a resort business versus what you need in a pub or a restaurant or a nightclub can be different from time to time. But I think what we need across the board now is we need to give businesses and individuals the confidence to go out and do stuff and spend money, and also to give businesses the confidence to continue to employ people and grow their business. So I think the best thing that we could do across the board is reduce VAT. If you look at where we're at right now, as a sector, as a tourism sector, we have the highest tax of any tourism sector of major economies in Europe. So let's change that because other countries realize the value of making sure that tourism is vibrant and lively and you get people in and doing things. We should be able to do the same. And so for me, the one thing that I would do would be to cut VAT.
Yeah, nice. Very, very nice. And from a careers perspective, like if you were kind of like, notes to your kind of like, younger self, if that's the right way of putting it, kind of like if you could go back to yourself and kind of like give yourself one piece of career advice, what would it be?
I do this from time to time because I have those conversations with my children. I think it's quite nice to be able to do that. Unfortunately, they still talk to me, so that's helpful.
Mhm.
Uh, for me, particularly if you're not going down a very defined professional route. So if you're doing something in general management, like the route that I've been on, one of the things that I would have done early would have been to have written down quite clearly a list of things that I liked and didn't like in the environments that I was in, and also the things that I thought I was good at and the things that I didn't think I was good at, because I think doing that really crystallizes A, the areas and the type of businesses that you're interested in, and B, where you think you can do well. And I think the sweet spot is if you land in a business where you like the environment, you like the culture, you like what it does, and it's in a space where you're good at something, I think you can shoot on really quickly. So for me, I would have done that earlier in my career. That would have been the advice I would have given to myself in my 20s. And I would definitely recommend that for anybody that I talk to now.
Absolutely. And final question. So obviously with an organization which has got the history and the culture and all and the brand that Butlins kind of has, like I always think that kind of like chief exec positions are more like stewardship kind of like positions, like that you're kind of like looking after it to pass over to kind of like the next people and all of that kind of stuff. So what would you really like to be remembered for your time at Butlins?
Wow, that's a huge question. I'd like to be remembered ideally for two things: for being really clear that we got the home of entertainment on track for the future. And we set Butlins up really well to be exciting for the next lot of families and the next lot of families after that. And also that we created a really diverse and fun culture in which to work, whereby it felt as much fun to be at work as it was for the guests who were there, or as well. So I think if those two things happened, I would be absolutely delighted.
Excellent. John, amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us. I really
Thank
appreciate it because I know how busy it is for you, you kind of like all the time. So I really appreciate you hopping on and taking the time. And I
you.
promise not to turn up at your front door.
It was great to see you.